Not withdrawing my remarks. In fact, I'm standing by them, and I repeated them outside of the House of Commons. So once again, if the Prime Minister is so sure of his case, will he commence court proceedings so that Canadians can finally hear the truth about this scandal?
The Conservatives continue to mislead Canadians, and Canadians deserve better. On Monday, the Conservative leader refused to denounce white supremacists in this House. On Tuesday, a Conservative senator said, quote, "I would find it disturbing to believe that there's a politician in this country that believes that white supremacy is a threat to our way of life in Canada." When will the Conservative leader finally denounce white supremacists by name, and will he denounce comments from a member of his own caucus?
If you feel like you might have lost the thread there, you're not alone. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer held another press conference this morning to push the Prime Minister to sue him. That stems from a statement Scheer put out at the end of March that prompted Trudeau's lawyer to threaten litigation. Now the Tory leader is doubling down and repeating the same words and daring the Prime Minister to act. Is this going anywhere? Time for the Power Panel. APTN producer Bruce Spence joins us from Winnipeg. In Toronto, Amanda Alvaro of Pomp and Circumstance. And here with me in studio, Summa Strategies' Tim Powers and Kathleen Monk of the Earnscliffe Strategy Group. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Great to see you.
Hello there.
I think I'm just going to circle back to that question. Is this going anywhere? Tim, I'll start with you.
Probably around and around and around in a circle. I mean, the comment the Prime Minister was referring to, or the point he was making, was in reference to Senator Leo Housakis and an exchange he had with Minister Freeland at a Senate caucus hearing. Admittedly, and I think Housakis has said it themselves, he asked a very poorly worded question about whether or not white supremacy existed in Canada. That's sort of a dumb question to ask in this time. He's come out since and said, obviously, he repudiates it and he's against it and doesn't support it. Andrew Scheer said the same thing. I think the Prime Minister is, again, trying to get away from the whole SNC-Lavalin affair. Going after the Conservatives on an area they perceive to be a weakness is probably something they think will help, although it did look a little bit desperate if you looked at the number of tweets and then looked at what Housakis actually said, though I suppose in doing that, it did move you away from SNC-Lavalin. But I mean, the Prime Minister needs to get away from that because every time somebody in his government gets near it, it seems to have the kryptonite effect on them and makes them weak and gets them in trouble. So, yeah, I suspect we're going to have lots of weird conversations like this, Vashi, as people try away and stay away from areas they're sensitive about.
Yeah, I mean, for those watching at home who already haven't formed their opinion, which I think most Canadians already have, I mean, I think the scorecard would clearly show right now still advantage Scheer. Because really it's been, despite the Liberals' attempts to turn the page time and time again with the budget, with kicking out the two members from caucus, even with the great Loblaws fanfare giving them $12 million for new fridges yesterday, failed to turn the page off the SNC-Lavalin scandal, right? So we're now about 2 weeks out since the legal letter was sent to Scheer, 3 days since his big press conference on the weekend. He did another one today, as you just mentioned. I don't think the story's going anywhere, but what does it mean to Canadians? I think they're just plugging their ears at this point and almost, what in past years when Harper was around, we used to condemn him when he prorogued. I think that Canadians might thank the government if they decided to pull the plug now and prorogue.
I mean, on the point that, on the sort of story that led to the response, it was the lawsuit, the threat of a lawsuit that was made earlier. And today was sort of a repeat of what we heard on Sunday when the Conservatives came out with it, which was, okay, if this is something that you want to do, then just sue us. We're not going to sort of retract what we said. What do you think, Amanda, the political implications or the strategy behind that is?
Well, first of all, what is happening in the House of Commons? What is happening to Canadian politics, which resembles more and more like American politics every day? We're just descending into these spats across the aisle, which are really disturbing, lacking any form of decorum, dignity, integrity that I think that they're capable of. But I can imagine, I'm quite certain that there are more reasonable conversations happening on the playground of my child's kindergarten school people than there are in the House of Commons. And it's not just that. It's the fact that, parliamentarians can stand up in the House of Commons, they can spew lies, it can then be reported as fact. It's the fact that Conservative MPs like Michelle Rempel can go on Twitter and use vile and vulgar language about her colleagues across the aisle like it's her full-time job. And I think that's really where the idea of the lawsuit came from, that there is a standard, that we have lost it, that people can say whatever they want to say, that lies can be spewed. It's then reported as fact. Canadians are forced to consume it. And it's drivel. It's awful.
It's really sad that Canadians have fallen to that level where they're starting to believe this stuff. I mean, when does a prime minister threaten the leader of the opposition with a lawsuit? I mean,
he's not the first. Many times, actually, Bruce.
If he indeed has a lawsuit, he should file that claim right now and get Mr. Scheer on the defensive. If he doesn't have the lawsuit, he should just stop making dumb threats like that. It's not becoming of Canadian Parliament for that kind of behavior. And I don't know if Canadians
That's the behavior that's unbecoming?
I don't think Canadians are going to find that, that it's not nice. It's not good. It's not how Canadians do things. We argue logically. We use facts.
Do we?
We don't. Well, I would like to think so. Do we not?
That's exactly the point I'm making.
Yes,
But I think you're making sort of similar points. Amanda's saying that if the point of the threat of the lawsuit is to, from her perspective, is to quell mistruths that are put out there, lies, whatever you want to call it. But Bruce is saying if you really mean that, then why don't you sue?
And then there's irony, isn't it? Wasn't it somewhat ironic? Yesterday, I believe it was, when the Prime Minister was going somewhere, he was asked about the lawsuit and what he was going to do now, and he repeated a line that's been used often: well, we can't stand up and tolerate lies and all of that. And look, the Prime Minister, like everybody else, has the right to sue anybody if he feels he's been defamed. But I mean, in making that statement, as you saw today, people started to put together this clip montage of the Prime Minister on February 7th saying everything the Globe and Mail had reported about SNC-Lavalin was false, and then putting all the other statements together where it changed. Look, there's the tool and the tactic, and then there's the actual strategy. And whatever the strategy was in sending that letter, it wasn't well thought out from a number of perspectives. One, they had to assume the opposition was going to leak it. Two, there is the irony of all of this. And three, you need to take the emotion out of it if you're the Prime Minister or anybody else. Usually if you send one of those letters, you're angry, you're upset. You feel like this is a great relief, but it has the opposite impact because it comes back on you, and in this case, arguably makes the Prime Minister look a little petty.
And like I said before, Harper did it to
Yeah, they all look stupid doing it.
Chrétien did it to Preston Manning.
But the interesting thing here, and Tim raises it, is that it seems like the lawyers are leading the communications and the issue management strategy, which should never happen. It should never happen. Why? Because basically, Tim said earlier in a paper this week that it was pouring gas on a fire in terms of this legal letter. But the thing is, you don't let, and actually, if you do track back the Prime Minister's comments from February 7th, not April, not March, but February 7th, they have been a legal response, that there has been no interference, as opposed to actually a more authentic response and dealing with it in a wholesome, truthsome way that could have maybe snuffed out this issue many weeks ago. I mean, I said on the panel a few weeks ago that they should, the Liberals should all dial a friend for a communication help, like call up Peter Donolo or someone to help shape the messaging. But now I actually think they need to call up some good opposition researchers. They might need to go on the offensive now. They might need to dig out some of that material that they might be saving for the election campaign and start rolling it out to put some body blows into the opposition that has been hurting them so desperately in their brand over the last few weeks.
Quick word from you, Amanda and Bruce. Amanda? Or I'll go with Amanda first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't entirely disagree with Kathleen, and I'm not a strategist in the room, so I don't know what the strategy was around the idea of the lawsuit, except that it was to signal to Canadians that there has to be a standard, that you cannot just share lies. Like, we had independent MP Jane Philpott stand in the House yesterday and accuse the Prime Minister of breaking the law, and then it was reported as fact.
She asked the Speaker to see whether he did, and she said her rights were breached.
Right, and then it was reported as this fact in virtually every media outlet across the country. This is a disturbing trend. It looks a lot like American politics, and a lot of that is being led, fish-led, not that particular story, by the Conservative Party. And I do agree with Kathleen that the Liberal Party now needs to get on the offense, needs to be talking about some of the issues that matter to Canadians, and force the Conservatives to have to talk about some of those issues.
I guess then why not actually file the suit, to Bruce's point? If
Conservatives didn't send that libel notice.
Bruce, go ahead.
If nobody's noticed, the campaign before the campaign is already on. You know,
Yeah, exactly.
we are in campaign mode, and right now the Liberals are not doing very well. They're not looking very well.